That's awesome.
I'm Naomi.
That was right.
Apparently they do care about us.
See? I'm Naomi. I teach theater at the Ella Baker School. It's a pre-K through 8th grade school. It's like a little unicorn school in District 2, but I feel like it's like no other District 2 school. And I've been there for 7 years, and I was in South Brooklyn before that. And Dale and I came together over, well, we bonded over lots of things, devising immersive theater, but really now it's our love of rubrics. Dale and I are essentially the same person when it comes to nerding out about theater things. Sleep No More, rubrics, just all the things.
We realized that we didn't know each other before last year, and we're kind of the same person from different
really knew each
generations
other,
and
yeah.
different bodies. In 2011 to 2013, there was a thing called Arts Achievement. And New York City was one of, I believe, 4 cities involved in it, where we did a 3-year study in certain classrooms to talk about technology and assessment in arts classrooms. And there is a woman named Heidi Andre. This woman, we are fortunate that she walks among us. She is a genius when it comes to rubrics. In between 2011 to 2012, I saw the single biggest jump in student productivity that I have seen in my 27-year career. Simply because I learned how to use a rubric. Notice it's not like just, oh, that I have a rubric. How to use it throughout the process from designing my unit through a summative assessment. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to ask the 3 of you to be a group because we have an odd number, that you're going to pass your paper to the to one of the other people, but just be a triangle. Everybody else take a partner and exchange papers. And read their introduction.
Thank you. You're welcome. Oh, am I not handing this out yet?
Yeah, you are.
Great.
Crazies? Yes.
Here you are.
Oh, amazing.
All right. Using the rubric that you were just given, assess the assignment that you were just given.
That's the rubric?
You called by both names, or did you just shorten it to Han?
I have 2 dogs.
I know, so you
Chewbacca.
shorten this one to just Han, or do you say Han?
Depends.
So
if they're in
once
trouble,
again,
if they're
you are reading what you were handed, and you are assessing it based on the rubric that you were given to use.
okay.
I might use this exact rubric for the rest of the year. Okay. Yeah, this is the only one I will use. That's just this one.
Okay.
We circle?
Yep.
Jared.
Pardon? You can make it for you.
No, I already remember.
Number 2.
I got jokes.
Exactly.
Hold on to that.
It's alarmingly American. All right,
I'm gonna
so
put that in my bios.
tone. I'm just gonna write down your grade me. Hold nothing back. I was gonna say, yeah.
It's so funny.
Alarmingly American.
I'm actually rather proud of the last square on the
I haven't
page.
even read this person has ever written sentence. I would be shocked to hear this.
All 4s.
Right at the
Rubric is a
Earth
play,
Day.
right?
It's good.
All right. How many of you failed this assignment?
Borderline.
Or did a whole lot worse than you thought you were going to?
I'm in. All right.
How many of you did worse than you thought you were going to? You did the assignment. You passed the assignment to someone.
Yes.
How many of you did worse than you intended? Why?
Did we do the assignment? We weren't given the assignment.
Oh, it's a.
But you were.
We were.
No, we weren't.
You were.
Not
Right up
told-
there, it
we
says
were
what you
not
needed to
told-
do.
We were not told to address the
We're
king.
getting gotcha. I see what.
This assignment says written introduction to King Charles III. That wasn't the assignment I was given.
So that's the point. How often do we tell our students, you're performing a scene? And then we go on the internet and we find some random rubric written by someone we've never met who doesn't use necessarily the same criteria we've been teaching them, doesn't use the same terminology we've been teaching them, and hasn't designed an entire curriculum building to that rubric. But you're like, okay, yeah, I have a rubric. And now you're trying to grade one thing through the lens of something that's completely unrelated, and they have never been handed that lens.
Fish cannot take driving tests.
Like, you go, when I do my assignment, like when I start a unit, day one, I say, we are going to be doing scene work. You need to select a partner. Here are some options of scenes. And here's some questions about the scene up on the board, and you're doing a scene analysis with your partner. Great. Day two, you get the rubric. Everything from here on out is working toward exactly how I will be assessing you. And I did not randomly print out someone else's assessment. If you're going to get a rubric off the internet, you need to also get the entire unit curriculum.
Right.
Because then it should be building toward that rubric. I'm not gonna lie, making your own quality rubrics is a shit ton of work.
Yeah.
And you should not have a goal of having a fantastic rubric at the end of every unit you create right now. Maybe this semester you get 2. And they're saved digitally because you're gonna use them and you're gonna realize, oh, that wasn't clear. And you're gonna go back and you're gonna change them. But once you have them, you have them. And they work. And they communicate very clearly to your students what they need to do and how you're going to be grading them. And this is not for the kids that are going to go on to create the Pigpen theatricals, that are going to theater camp in the summer, that come in and they're bearing their souls and other things you didn't want to see. This is for that kid. Well, I don't draw and I don't sing and I don't dance, so I guess I'm in here. But they also are not content to fail. But you say something like, well, I need for you to emotionally connect. What the hell does that mean? This is to say, you can't truly put into a rubric artistry. But you can put skill set. And if I'm seeing you meet these levels of these skills, I can absolutely give you credit for having worked on this scene. And it's making the concrete out of something that is very abstract. And many of us probably went to high school with theater teachers that we did a scene and we got an 85. And we can't tell you why. Every one of my students can tell you why. Because they have known from the beginning exactly how they were going to be assessed.
What do you wish we had done with this assignment?
Clarifying question. Clarifying question?
You wish we had asked you a clarifying question,
No,
or
no,
you're
no,
asking
a clarifying question for the question
for my
you just
question I
asked.
just asked. Got
Yes,
it.
so that we could do the assignment better, or so that it was a more of a learning experience about rubrics?
So that you could do the assignment better.
Okay,
We're in the role of students
just check.
doing an assignment. So what do you wish we had done? Yeah.
Gone over the rubric with us before we started.
Great. Had gotten the rubric first, so you know what you're being assessed on.
Told us who we were addressing.
Right.
No, I
You agree?
yeah, I mean, that's when I was in university, well, I always had a rubric, so I knew exactly how my term papers, what I needed to have in them in order to get, you know, an A, a B, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know.
I think style matters a little bit because I feel like probably a lot of us just made a list because we saw the list.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of us didn't know going in we were going to be judged on the writing because we're like, oh, it's a 1, 2, 3 list.
Right. It's a bullet pointed list. Why would I address anything formally? Right? How am I presenting the work to you? Absolutely. Anything else?
Yeah, I was gonna add to that, it's the same, it's like, well, how many words you want us to write? Because technically, I gave my name, I gave the grades that I taught, and I gave a fun fact about myself.
Right.
So,
I did what I was asked to
I
do,
just did what I was
but I was
actually
never
asked.
given the criteria of what I was actually.
Yeah,
Right.
but it was all correct. And it gave,
So,
you know,
what makes a good rubric?
Clarity.
Okay.
Quantifiable information.
Say more. What do you mean by that?
If it's open-ended, if it's like, write something that moves me, that's not enough information to know whether you're doing it right or wrong.
So, objective things that you can grasp
Yes.
to, not, I feel this way.
Right, achievable, quantifiable.
Achievable, yes.
Written with audience in mind. So like, depending on what grade you teach, the way that you write your rubrics should be able to make sense to those grades, I guess.
Student friendly language,
That's a great way to say it.
And visuals as well.
Yes.
depending on the language of the student or the reading abilities.
Relative vocabulary.
Say that again.
Relative vocabulary. So it's going to be terms that like are used like in regular feedback or questioning or not unfamiliar terms, but actual intention behind what specific words you choose, depending on where you are.
So if you're going to use it on the rubric, you better use it in that
Class.
unit.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it should also be standards based.
Standards based. Absolutely.
That was the one that we all were like, no, that doesn't matter.
I'm going to
It's
go
part
ahead
of
and say that if you look at the
everybody's
New York
standards.
State standards
For theater.
for theater,
Yeah.
chances are that if you're doing good theater teaching for that age group, it's gonna be in the state standards. The blueprint is a really wide gap, but the state standards is fantastic.
Yes. I was gonna say accessible language. Like something I've been challenging myself on for we were doing a participation unit and I said student is like sitting up straight and I replaced that with student is showing engaged body language. Just like those little switches I've been trying to be more cognizant of.
So think about accessibility within for your population. Yeah.
One thing we're encouraged to do with our rubrics at my school is include accommodations.
We'll talk to that. Yeah. Yeah. What's the purpose of
Sorry, I didn't hear that last one.
include accommodations? How do I make my work better? What can I do if I can't do this?
Or
Try this.
how to make it possible, accessible so that all kids can be successful,
Mhm.
like the city
What's the purpose of a rubric? There are many.
No ambiguity.
It sets an expectation.
I can't.
What's the purpose of a rubric? It
No,
sets
I-
expectations.
Expectations.
Mm-hmm.
It's like to measure student growth, like so that way, like what's next for your students, what they're able to take on next, experience next. But they have to it's a step by step
Measuring student growth, agreed. Where can they go next? What have they achieved? What do they still need to work on? And I'm going to go ahead and say it's for the teacher to measure student growth, but
Right,
also
to
for
inform
students
their-
to measure their own growth. Anything else? Purpose of rubric? A good rubric? Yeah.
I would say like it should also be for the teacher so that in the moment in class, like you can also make sure that you're focusing on what they need to know to get like the best grade, so you're not like paying attention to things that probably don't matter for this specific assignment.
Right, so this student, super easily, they come to XYZ, they've got 4s, no problem. Or, alternatively, this class got 4s on this criteria, no problem. Everyone got a 1, oof. I need to go back and reteach that. Something, the mark was missed somewhere, right? I didn't quite get it. What do I need to do to help them, right? Because there should be a smattering, right? If everyone's at a 4, you're teaching below their level. If everyone's at a 1, you've done something wrong. We've all been there, it's fine. Go back and reteach. If you've got across the board, then you know you're doing something right.
It also depersonalizes. It's not subjective.
Right, absolutely. And that's that quantifiable language, right? It's not, I like you, you get 100.
Right.
You're not putting in
Or
the
you're
effort.
well-behaved.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. You're well behaved, great.
Yeah.
What does that say about your theater skill?
It removes bias.
Yeah, correct.
In that, well, you know, Naomi went up and she did a fantastic scene, and I know she's a hard worker and she really cares about this and this is good. But we want to keep pushing her. She gets a 92, just so that there's something to strive for. And then I go up and I never engage, but suddenly I'm doing like something. It's like, oh my God, he showed up. 95, let's
Right.
But Naomi did so much more work. If her grade was a 92, I shouldn't have that just for standing up and smiling and saying some words.
Yeah.
So it removes all that thought and it takes the onus off of you in terms of defending a grade if someone should question it. Is it says, nope, because these are the things that you did and this is where you are. And I've been using it throughout the unit, so you knew this in your formative assessment. And we can use it to help you get to 3s and 4s in every category.
Let's do it.
All right.
Should we hand out this this rubric?
So here's the first rubric for your consideration,
No problem.
which is a rubric for scene work. Read over it and get a few notices. You are a student in my class. I am handing you this so that you know what I expect as you perform. I'm sorry, this one's not funny. What are a few notices?
I think there's a lot of language that makes assumptions about things, like on blocking 2, it says it looks like they've never rehearsed it this way before. They may have. I think that's like an assumption.
Okay.
So I feel like it's starting from like a deficit mindset, not an achievement mindset.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I noticed as well in blocking in the 1 space, I know of some scenes and that were not moving is justified.
Okay. Can somebody read out loud in blocking 4?
Actor
Actor-
moves. So go ahead. It's all you.
Okay, actor moves when it is appropriate, facing the audience for the best visibility.
Now, can someone define for me when it's appropriate?
No.
Can someone tell me 100% for sure when a student is participating usually and when a student is participating sometimes? Because that is the biggest siren on a rubric. Always, usually, sometimes,
Right.
never. We can all identify always and never. But if I'm using this to truly assess myself and say, how am I going to do on this assignment? How do I know what is usually and what is sometimes? And I've never taken theater before. I don't understand what's expected.
Right. What does it mean to stay in character?
Exactly. What does it mean to stay in character? What does it mean to make the audience feel something emotionally?
And why is it my fault if the audience didn't feel something emotionally?
And how do you know? Exactly.
It could be
And how do I as a teacher, short of them crying,
Yeah.
know that they felt something emotionally? And I expect to have an emotional impact from your performance, a fair level of assessment for a ninth grader who's just trying to get their arts credits. It's not. And if I do want to say, no, you must impact me emotionally, this does not give me any way of knowing how to do that.
Right.
It doesn't say in 3 what was lacking that made me not connect emotionally. Also, because connection emotionally is not actually something that should be on here because it's not measurable. I always design my rubrics by saying, I'm a kid who does not know anything about this coming through the door. I know nothing about performing a Shakespearean soliloquy. How can I create a tool that is going to help them actively learn about it while rehearsing and using the rubric? This is not saying that I go into my rubrics assuming they're dumb. I go into my rubrics assuming that they are smart enough to be capable of achieving all these 4s, but that I need to provide information for them to do it. So now I'm giving you a second rubric for scene work that you can compare and contrast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
I do want to point out that I do teach high school and that I teach it at an art school. Not all of our kids intend to be art students. I also get about half a class that are like, why am I in here? But I am not, this is not a rubric that I would use when I taught middle school. So this is very specific, and we are in a few minutes going to divide into a high school versus an elementary school, middle school setting to build a rubric. So obviously Naomi is going to talk to what this looks like for a second grader, as this may not be the best tool for assessing an 8-year-old trying to do a scene.
7,
Yeah.
second grade.
But what are some notices, in particularly compared to the one that I had just given?
I think these are a little more structured and like I think it's easier to understand. I had a question about one of them. Vocalization 3. It says they do not change their voice to become more like the character. I know this is for high school, but that one felt. I had a question about that because what if the character doesn't necessarily need a different voice?
We talk about lots of ways that people can change. We do an entire unit just on using your voice for interpretation. This is obviously not where I start my curriculum.
Oh,
So we've talked about things like rate and pitch and tone and just. So if you're coming on stage and I can hear everything you say, but I'm really not getting a vocal performance, doesn't mean that they have to suddenly have a crazy accent.
oh, okay.
It just means when you speak, do I think you mean what you're saying or are you just remembering your lines? But you are speaking clearly and loudly.
But it's just like them speaking almost. They
That
have
makes
you
way
don't
more
experience a
Yeah.
character.
Right.
Yeah. But I would to piggyback off that, or just my curiosity was like, how that was it in the 4, that language in the 4. Just curious, like, or do you know what I mean? In the 4 for vocalization,
Uh-huh.
like they're clear vocal choices based on the text, but doesn't say about a change in their voice. So I was just curious.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, or it's assumed
Again.
at that point.
at this point, and this is actually all a very good point.
Yeah.
When I design this rubric, my first things that I need to do, and this is what we're going to practice, is I'm going to say, I need to see a scene. I want for it to be a quality scene. What makes a scene quality? And I say, good acting. Well, that's horrible. What makes for good acting? Physical choice, vocal choice, objective. When it says this, it's because this is the 3rd unit that I'm doing. We did a unit of pantomime, which is just using their body to tell a story without using their voice. So we talked about all sorts of physical choice. So now when they get this rubric and it says makes physical choices, they have already had a 4-point rubric 2 units ago in which we broke all that down. So you're right. That is less clear, and this is not, for that reason, this is not the best introduction at the beginning of the year. But this is also not my first unit.
I get it. So it's like assuming at that point, like they know if you're making clear vocal choices, it's inherent that you know there's probably a change in that. voice.
Yes,
Okay.
we have already done
Gotcha.
interpretive reading in which they had to read sitting behind us, and we just discussed the
Yeah.
quality of their voice.
I
And
like
it's-
That makes a
too.
lot more sense. Thank you.
It's exactly the reason why Dale started out by saying, I wouldn't take his rubric and then go teach a scene work, not because I teach Bless You pre-K through 8th grade, right? And this would go over their heads, but I'm not teaching into these things the same level he is. Because I see my kids 3 times a week, at most, right? I'm assuming you see your students every day,
I do.
right? So he's able to dig in a lot more than I can. So even if I teach scene work, my rubric is probably going to look a lot different. Might have similar criteria, might have less criteria, might have added, right? But my students wouldn't have gotten pantomime before. They might not have necessarily gotten whatever else you do before, right? So even though I'm teaching scene work, I can't use this scene work rubric because I'm not necessarily teaching what is on this rubric. So he's going to teach into those vocal choices because he knows he's giving it to them in the rubric.
And the other thing to keep in mind, you want to create your own rubrics because when you get to something like that, you don't know what I mean by physical choices or specific physical choices because you're not in my class. This rubric is written for my class, where that has become a shorthand by this point in the year. Like, it's not that the rubric is teaching for me. The rubric is supplementing my teaching and giving them a visual, because if I'm standing there talking, this provides like that visual representation. But there's also, I don't say on objective that you have a different activity or a different action. I say you have a different tactic. Because even though all 3 of those things are interchangeable, tactic is the word I use. So it's the word they use. And I teach them, I'm like, you may go to college and they call it something else and they're not wrong, but I'm not wrong either.
So it's like you scaffold the rubrics.
Right.
Okay.
And when I look at this, now I go into my curricular design. Because I start a unit by making a rubric. I make this rubric and I say, physicality, vocalization. Yes, we have worked on those. Great. I'll do a quick review on those. We'll do some kind of brush up as they're getting into rehearsal. Objective, blocking, memorization. We haven't done those yet. Those are where I start building in my lessons. By the way, if you expect for your kids to memorize stuff and you're not teaching them multiple modes of memorization, you should look into that. Because for a large percentage of kids, staring at it and reading it over and over is not helpful. But if you're going to require memorization, then you need to teach them how to memorize. And if you're going to grade them on blocking, you need a couple of days of playing with blocking with samples. But I don't really need to put aside lessons on physicality and vocalization, which I've already devoted units. Yeah.
I noticed the first rubric I talked about blocking, and I noticed in this one, and what I really liked is even when you come up with a rubric that's objective, art and directing and acting can still be so subjective based on the actor and the director. So I really like that you included there's no blocking or et cetera, without reason. Like I like that there's still, I don't know if you intended this, but I like that there's still a space for students to justify their choices, which I think is so important in teaching and acting. So I like that bit.
Do you have
There's also tons of interpretive space in this rubric. Are you giving me physical choices? I'm not telling you what the choices should be. I'm telling you they should be there. If you come out and your old lady has a cane, cool. You come out and your old lady is particularly spry, but you have given her a really different posture, cool. I'm not telling you that you have to do these prescribed things. I'm telling you, you want a 4, you have to do something. Sorry, you were gonna comment?
Yeah, totally.
It's really hot in here.
Yeah.
I'm just giving everybody grace
Oh, I
for the
was
fact
curious.
that we're in a sauna.
I remember now. I was curious if you ever debrief one-on-one in this type of rubric situation, and if it I was thinking a teacher's observation, how we're oh no, but this is why I chose this, and they're sort of, because in their high school, they defend their position or their choice.
While they are rehearsing,
Yeah.
every time that my students are rehearsing, they have a copy of the rubric in their hand.
Right.
All the time. And sometimes in the middle of rehearsal, I'm hold. Everybody please take a moment and look over the 4 levels of blocking. For your next 2 rehearsals of this, your next 2 times through, just focus on blocking. So it kind of gives them the bricks to build the platform. So I use it that way, and then if I come by and I'm spot watching your scene, we might talk about one of the points.
Right.
By the time we get to summative, we're talking about the success of your scene.
Sure.
But we don't start out there. We find the places of and I'll be real quick, I'll be your vocalization is fantastic, but I'm not seeing that in your physicality. And then they can pick up a paper and be oh.
Yeah. So they're self-assessing.
I'm going to share a rubric with you that was written for a 6th grade group. And it's not for performance, it's for a monologue writing. And it speaks to exactly what Dale was just talking about, which is it gives students the opportunity to edit their work. And I'll let you take a deeper look, but it gives students the opportunity to understand. I'm going to let you just read it, and then I'll talk to it.
Can I ask a question about So I know this is obviously performance rubrics, teamwork. Would you use this exact same rubric, say for pantomime, and just take out vocalization and memorization? Would you use the same?
No,
You would change it up.
because I'm breaking down different points of physicality.
Okay, I see.
Like that physicality is kind of a
Different than pantomime.
yeah, but I would definitely use that physicality, pretty much exactly physicality,
Okay.
when we're doing a Shakespearean soliloquy.
Okay.
Like nope, but physicality is physicality.
Right.
You know.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Is
what
this
are
a peer assessment? Like the audience is assessing?
yes and. My question was going to be, what do you notice different about this rubric than other ones? So yes, this is used both for peer and for me to give formative assessment during the unit. So I would read over the students' work and be able to sit down with them and give them feedback using this rubric.
And who would write the notes?
6th grade.
Who would write the notes? You, the student, or would you generate?
Whoever's assessing.
Ah.
Whoever's assessing. So if a student is assessing a student, the student assessing would write the notes. If I was the one assessing, I would be the one writing the notes. So if you take a close look, each criteria except for the one that there's three levels, right? Could be an example, you've got it, keep working. Each criteria except for could be an example, gives the students something to consider, gives them something to strive for to get to the next level. What do I need to do?
Which is so brilliant, I wish I could tell you I had thought of it. I saw this rubric and I was like, what? It's phenomenal. Steal that from her.
It makes the teaching job, when you have to assess, right? Each student wrote their own monologue. And I had 30 students in this class. It's a lot of work to give each of those students individual feedback. You're still going to have to do it. And that section where it says notes for draft 2, that's where I can put something like, my consider didn't quite hit the mark, right? They did this thing, but it's still not quite there. Why? Let me see. That's where my notes go, and that's where our conference comes in. You didn't quite get character development. Here's what I would ask you to take a look at and go back and draft 2. Yeah.
Sorry, just a quick question. Like, what was the what did they have to make the monologue? Like, could it be based on anything?
No, it was a whole unit. It was based in images from, students spoke about current events and topics that they were interested in. I culled images from those specific moments in history. And then students chose something or someone in that image to write from the perspective of that monologue.
Picture?
From an actual picture. But the pictures were gathered from many different sources and many different events. Yeah, so there's like a picture from the Women's March, there's a picture from the Stonewall riots, or there's a picture from whatever students came in saying that they were excited about learning. But then like a student ended up writing a monologue based on the perspective of a snowflake that was falling during the parade, and I have chills. It was brilliant.
Anything offensive before?
What do you mean?
I don't know.
In the monologues?
Yeah, yeah. Whether it's like inappropriate or
I'm sure.
how far it could go without like.
I'm sure there were, right? Because it's 6th graders, but
Yeah.
nothing that I remember that like came out. And again, if it's justified in the character, right? Like if we're looking at a picture and there's a protest from BLM and you see people who are against the protest, and you're giving me something from the perspective of, right? You're stepping into that person's shoes and you're starting to think about, what is that? They might say something offensive.
Right.
And we have offensive characters, and that's what gives our work depth. If it's not you that's saying it, and it's based and founded in that character development, I understand that you've done your research. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. I'm sure there were,
Okay.
but I can't think of anything. The last time I taught this was 3 years ago. Great.
Do you ever, like, because there's so many kids sometimes, I mean, I don't know your load, but like, in the comment section, would you be like, see consideration? Like, do you know what I mean? Instead of like
I'll
writing,
just circle it.
yeah,
I'll just
right.
circle it.
And then
The
put an arrow or
notes.
something. Yeah.
The notes is where I'll add
Yeah.
anything that's not already there.
Okay.
Because if I'm handwriting for all of these kids and I see all of the kids in the school, if I'm handwriting for all of these
Right.
kids, I'm going to be there all day. It's just not possible, right? But if it's already written and it makes sense for that student, I can just circle it.
Yeah.
The notes is more, this didn't quite
Additive,
cover it,
yeah,
or
sure.
consider this as well, or you're an example, but I wonder if you did this,
The question.
what would happen?
Yeah. Right.
So, Naomi and I have a slight problem in that we love rubrics so much that we talk about them a lot and run out of time. And they are using this room for one of the breakout. So, we have not talked about
We haven't.
this. Do we want to talk about this, or do we want to talk about like how you do that, like how you build one?
Yeah. Let's ask.
Would you rather talk about
To
co-creation
audience.
or about how we build? Because we got time for one.
Co-creation.
I'm
Okay.
interested in
Raise your hand for co-creation. Co-creating rubrics with students. Okay, hands down. How we create our rubrics.
Why don't we split up? We got a room next door.
Yeah, brilliant.
Co-creation,
I'll talk
stay
about
in here.
co-creation.
How we build rubrics. Let's just step right next door,
Okay.
please.
Love that.
Everybody's happy.
But I'm going to tell you how I co-create rubrics with students, and I'm also going to talk to how I use rubrics with elementary, because I teach pre-K through 8, and I use them as early as like first grade, and it looks very different in first grade than it does for an 8th grader. So a checklist can also be great. Martha, you were saying like a visual, right? Like if the students know what that symbol stands for, you're set, right? This person with a microphone, megaphone, whatever, is projecting. What is projection? And a first grader, right, if you help define it with them, they can tell you what projection is, but they're not going to sit there and read, like, use his diaphragm to support. They can't do that yet. But it doesn't mean that they can't do the skills. So checklists, great. Another thing that I really like to use is a single point rubric. Does anyone know what that is? Anyone heard about that? Okay. I love single point rubrics, specifically for peer-to-peer assessment. But I've also used it in formative assessment for myself with my students. So a single point rubric is exactly that. There is just one point, one criteria, and just the level 4 for that criteria, right? So if we're going with projection, no, I'm so sorry. There are all 4 criteria, but there's just the level 4 for those criteria, right? So maybe this box is the description of level 4 for projection. Maybe this box is the description of level 4 for facial expression. Maybe this box is the description of level 4 for memorization. I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. So it's just the level 4, and then the rest of it is blank. On one side, and I recommend it being the left side, it's what did I do well? Great. And then students can pull from the language in here to give each other clear, specific, actionable feedback. It was good, doesn't help me. You used your breath to support your voice and I heard you even though I was sitting in the back. That helps me. But if you didn't, I can go back to the drawing board, right? What am I working on? I had a really hard time hearing you. I was sitting in the back and your voice, I didn't know what you were saying most of the time. And it's not you were terrible, it was not you're bad. It's here's the language directly from here that I can use. And with this, when students start to give each other feedback with that single point rubric, their work gets inherently better, right? Because they've now talked about it and they've really thought about it, and they're able to then, without even knowing, do it in their own work. So how do we get here with students? That's one of my favorite things to do. Because It helps the students really understand the language of what, and the what they're doing. So I always start by having the rubric, whatever that is, right? Like if it's this guy, I start by having this for myself. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I want by the end of this unit. Then I show my students an example of other performances. I call them masterworks. And we start to talk about how these students are not in my classroom. They were here 7 years ago. They're old students, but let's pretend that they're in my classroom. How do we start to talk about their work respectfully? But how do we help them make their work better? Because if we're just here doing what we're doing and we never improve at all, what's the point of being here? What's the point of school? We're not learning anything. So, the scene we just watched was so great. Like those actors made choices. What was so interesting to watch about that? And I'll hand out this rubric that will make no sense in this, but if you ever heard me talk about the bean scene, right? When that actor performed their character with the layer of the intention of robot on top, and they said power down when they died instead of just falling to the floor dead. They made a choice. That's not in the script. Did it make sense with the script? Absolutely. Did it make sense with the character? Holy cow, yes it did. Did it add another layer for me as an audience member to be like, wow, that's really neat that they said that. That was really funny. Absolutely. What are we going to call that on our rubric? What is it called when you make something up? Improvisation? Ad-lib? Great, let's make that one of our criteria. And so I have them watch these examples of level 1, 2, 3, and 4. What was really, really great? What do you wish you had seen? And then I take the language they give me and I go back to my original rubric and I just tinker with it, right? They were really like attached to using their whole actor face. They were really attached to the idea of actor forehead, nose, mouth, chin, angle of head. Okay, if that really works for them, they understand what that means. And that means that sometimes, almost always, my rubrics will be they'll be different from class to class. So I'll have like a rubric for Malik and Callie's class and a rubric for Lauren's class. And they're both fourth graders doing the exact same unit, but it might look a little bit different based on what came out in their conversation. And the reality is it's not really any different. The criteria are the same, the levels are the same, but what makes sense to these students? I will say that if you haven't taught the unit before, finding other like work is helpful, but it really is the most impactful when it's like watching students their age do the work, because that's when they can get the actual language in there and what the expectation is. So what I just talked about, it's a single point rubric-ish and also a checklist-ish for this unit that I was just talking about. And you'll see that on one side is a peer assessment checklist and the other side is a self-assessment checklist for the exact same list, or for the exact same scene. So what they'll do is they'll do a baseline performance. They'll just act out the scene. Then they'll watch that baseline. No problem. Or they'll co-create the rubric. They'll watch their they'll co-create the rubric. They'll go back. After receiving the rubric, they'll go and start rehearsal. Then they'll get feedback from peers and watch themselves after that second performance. And they'll set a goal for themselves based on the rubric. Just one. I really need to work on face. I really need to work on ad-lib. I really need to work on imagination. I really need to work on body. Just one. And they'll set a clear, specific goal based in the language of the rubric. And then they'll go back and do a final performance, rehearsal and final performance. This is a very silly 1-minute scene.
You said bean earlier.
I did. I said bean scene. A few years ago, I did this as part of my Citywide scene work, or whatever this is, session. it's 3 characters on stage. There's a bean maker standing center stage making some beans, bean taster who tries the beans, asks the bean maker to try some, tries them, falls to the floor. We don't know what's happened. Bean maker in a panic calls off stage to a doctor. Bean doctor comes on, the bean maker goes. It's basically a 1-minute short script.
Yeah.
Then the audience reacts, oh no, the doctor has just announced everyone dead. And then the person who's on the floor, the bean taster, sits up and says, no, I'm not. And the audience says, hooray. Essentially, it's a very silly 1-minute scene. It's almost like an open scene, but they have characters.
Right.
And then on top of that, I layer an intention, like robot.
So the scene has already dialogue.
Correct.
Okay. They can improv.
Exactly. As long as the beginning, middle, and end of the scene are the same, they can improv. So do it like robots, do it super speed, do it like you've done this before.
I call it banana pudding. And it's someone making banana pudding, but there's also, the way I learned it, there was a doctor, priest at the end, who always has to say ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and that's how the scene ends. And then someone plays the director, who's like, that was great. It was too slow though. So can we go really fast?
Okay.
And so like that person is also.
So the students give the intention.
Yeah. There's
Cool.
always a director, yeah.
Cool. Love that.
So there's cook, a taster, and doctor.
Yeah, if you, I'll put my email up on the board. If you email me, I have this script typed up. It's a very silly, like, a little improv scene, but I use it to teach actors tools.
I'm doing improv right now with the kids, and I've been desperate to try and find. I'm coming up short a lot on activities that are on their level.
This is also really good because it's so repetitive and the language is so simple that if you have students who are new to English, it's super easy for them to grasp on. And could also be done non-verbally, and yeah. I'll put my email up on the board. The other thing that I wanted to say before that I didn't say, which is that Heidi Andrade, she created a series of videos basically talking about everything that Dale and I have talked about, but like in depth and like much better because she's brilliant. She's like, we're like fangirling her. But she created a series of videos that basically talks through everything we've done, but in depth for arts teachers specifically. I don't know where those videos live, which is such a shame, but if you email your borough arts director, they will know and they will be able to give it to you. And I bet they'll be so happy that you're asking about it because I'm sure a lot of money and time and effort went into creation of those videos that I feel like more people should have access and we should be able to use them. Dale and I were just very lucky in that we got to work with Heidi.
When you Google Heidi Andrade, the first word that comes up is Rubrics.
Yes, so she's a master of rubrics, and she's actually, I'm like, the 2 sessions are getting fuzzy in my head, but she teaches at the University of Albany, and she teaches in, like, their writing department. She's not an arts educator, she's not an arts rubric person, she's just a rubric master, and a good rubric is a good rubric is a good rubric. So, highly recommend if you have some spare time, and no one does, but maybe you can like advocate instead of sitting in the math PD, watching some of these videos. Highly recommend it. I'll also put my email up here if you'd like a copy of the bean scene. I am happy to send. Any questions?
Oh, I have a question. On the single point rubric, which is so cool.
It's very cool.
Do you use that to grade, or is that just for people?
It's only for formative assessment.
Got it.
I will say that like this monologue rubric that you all got, my summative assessment looks very similar to this. The considerations have all been taken out because it's done, the project's over. How dare I tell you to go consider something when you have no more opportunity to work on it? That's not fair, right? So the end is the end. If it's used summatively, then I can tell you to consider. But single point I only ever use as a formative assessment tool. I never use it summatively. Yeah. Other questions?
How would you co-create a rubric with first grade, with like a lower grade?
Just that.
Yeah.
Like, and like sometimes if I don't have it or if like I don't want to put, I try to put similar age, right? So like if I don't have a video of a first grader doing it, I'll act it out. What did you just notice me doing? Interesting. I'm going to try that again.
Yeah.
What about that time? What did you notice me doing?
Yeah.
What made version 1 better than version 2? Interesting. Oh, you saw my eyebrows go up to show you that I was excited? Oh, so I used my face to show what I was feeling. Yeah.
And when you do the wrong one on purpose, think
They
it's the
love
most
it. It's
hilarious
hysterical.
thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, and older kids too, right? Like, give me an example of a bad tableau, right? Like, I love that.
All do it in the
Let's
best
do
way.
bad directing. Great.
Yeah.
What a like more fun way of learning something than to do it right. And then they do it right every time. Yeah.
One thing I've been doing with my kids, like when they give feedback to each other, is I have them address the person instead of saying like she.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah. And like, she wasn't loud enough, so I try to, it's a constant reminder, but it's like I want you to frame it as a suggestion. Like next time you could try being louder or filling the space more. So that it's not always like you didn't do this, you didn't do that, but to frame it as a suggestion and to always address and look at the person. Like,
Yeah. And the amount of times I say like, tell them.
Tell them. Yeah, they look.
But I always frame it also as compliment and suggestion. So they always have to start with a compliment.
Right,
There's
right.
always something someone did well.
Right.
And it's so much easier to listen to the suggestion when a compliment has been given. And if you don't have a compliment for me, but you only have a suggestion, I don't want to hear it. Right? Like I can't listen to that.
Yeah.
So, and how easy is it for them to be able to pull from, wow, you really did you really did stick to the script,
Use the language.
but you just like walked on stage like yourself. You didn't really look like a robot. Could you use more of your body to show that you're a robot?
Right.
I can just literally repeat what's here.
Right.
And it starts to get me thinking about
Helpful to have it like on the board at that, right?
absolutely having those visual supports.
Because they'll say, wasn't loud enough. What could you use the language for the rubric?
Exactly. It wasn't good. That doesn't mean anything. What didn't you like? It was good. Also doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Awesome.
How do you
And it's
feel?
so easy for them to be like, their friends were good. But it's okay. It did help a little bit, I think.
Yes.
I think it did help a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, that was incredible. Thank you.
Oh, I was just saying the door
Oh,
opening,
I
but
thought
thank
you-
you. Yeah, I helped a little bit.
I was like, no, just
Both.
sure.
I reframed this a couple of years ago because I realized that something that I had been taught to do, I really didn't like. I was taught to have kids give feedback to each other saying, I liked, I wonder, I wish. And I realized that I wish made it personal. And it's not about me if I'm giving feedback.
Creative direction. Yeah. Because then they'll start. I wish it gives some sort of creative direction that takes away their like.
Yeah. And it also isn't about, I wish I could hear you better. It's, I can't hear you. And I think it's different.
Yeah.
It just depersonalizes it.
And I won't
Yeah.
say that always, but that's not always based in criteria, which makes it really hard for students to grasp at straws and then starts to get subjective.
Yeah. For sure.
And it really is just saying, okay, you watched this partner scene and they've watched your scene. Where is one category on the rubric where they are doing really well? Tell them the category and what they're doing well.
Oh, I love that.
What is one area on the rubric where they might focus their attention moving forward?
And what?
And why do you say that?
Right. What suggestions can you give them to
Right.
actually
Based on the
improve?
language.
Nice.
And we try in my class to not be prescriptive. It's just tell them what you witnessed. You might look at vocalization, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
That's it. It is up to the student to figure out moving forward how to make that better. But they have the information. You might look at physicality. I'm not seeing your character move in any way differently than you do. That's just information. And then I always point out to my students, if you think you're moving differently than you do, and you're getting feedback that you don't, it doesn't mean you're not doing it, it means you're not doing it big enough for us to perceive it. So do what you're doing and make it clearer. We're not saying, no, you're not. We're saying, oh, you're misperceiving your own sense of scale.
Yeah.
Right.
So let us see that work. And then it gives them something to work on.
Kind of ties to impact versus intent.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have sessions to get to.
Oh,
Is that right?
thanks
Are we
again.
here?
Thank
Is this
you.
Manhattan room?
Yeah.
Pretty.
Oh yeah.
This is 42, right?
Yep.
I am sure.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Right
again.
on.
I'm just making sure.